Good morning. Welcome to the Hixson First Baptist Bible Study, March the 7th, 2021. Welcome you and hope you will enjoy our conversation. This morning I want to look at both historical information and also look at what God says through the scriptures dealing with the subject. And the subject is America falling? Are we falling? Are we following other empires? And what are the factors? What's causing it if we are? I will give you the information and let you make up your own mind what you think. We'll look at the Empire of Rome. It lasted 436 years. America, in comparison, will only be 245 years old next July the 4th of 2021. So we're about half the age of what the Roman Empire lasted. Several things involve a nation beginning to fall. One is morality, or maybe immorality is a better word. Another factor is government. Too much, too little, too poor of a government. That's a factor. There's always the economy. The economy is a factor. Inflation. The money becomes less and less valuable. Used to could buy 2 bags of groceries for $20. Now you get 1 bag of groceries for $20. That's inflation. But the primary thing is immorality. And I miss one is immigration. The Romans allowed thousands and thousands of a sect called the Goths, Goths, to immigrate into the Roman Empire. The Goths over time became so powerful that they were able to overthrow the government of Rome, the Empire of Rome. So immigration, as far as it applies to Rome, played a big part. You wonder if maybe our immigration policies will come back to haunt us at some point in time. I do not know. I know the country was built on immigration. All of our forebears came from immigration. So where do you draw the line? I do not know the answer to that question. The people I looked at, the so-called experts in dealing with the fall of Rome, basically said the primary factor was the immorality of the nation. And they listed 7 stages that the Roman Empire went through dealing with the men and the women of that country. And I'm going to give you those 7 stages that they came up with. And you determine as we talk the similarities in what is happening in this country. We'll also look at Romans chapter 1 toward the end of the discussion, and we'll see what God said through Paul the epistle in his letter to the Romans in AD 57. But let's look at the 7 stages. The first stage they mentioned was that men ceased to lead their families in worship. Men ceased to lead their families in worship. They got too busy with other things. They got too busy making a living. They got too busy with sports, recreation. They got too busy with other things. Spiritual and moral development from men became secondary It lacked in importance. They no longer led their families to worship God Almighty. Now, that was the first stage. The second stage is that men neglected the care of their wives and children. Second stage, men neglected the care of their wives and children. They pursued material wealth, political and military power, and cultural development. Material wealth began to dominate their thought processes. Men, you got to look at your own life. What's dominating your thought processes is how to make more money, how to gain militarily or in whatever industry you're in. Are you really interested in the care of your wives and children? Are they number one or are they number four? The third stage was a change of sexual values. Men preoccupied with business neglected their wives, and they fell into prostitution or homosexuality. You know, sometimes we say that, well, I was born a homosexual, but we've proven over time that there are other factors, usually involving the mother or the father, that creates a situation that a child will drift into that lifestyle. And that's what was happening in Rome, a change in sexual values. Number 4 involves women. We can't give all the blame to the men. We got to share it with some of the women. The role of women at home and with children lost value and status. Women were neglected by men, and they revolted and started to begin to gain their own wealth. They went to work. They left the children at home. Sometimes it's necessary, we think, to provide for the entire family, and I understand that. But that second job should never come before the care of our children. Also, women began to focus on sexual pleasure rather than having children. That's a strange statement, and I know that. Number 5, the husbands and wives began to compete with one another for money, home leadership, and the affection of their children. Men, husbands, and wives began to compete with one another for those 3 things. It resulted in hostility and frustration in a marriage. And possibly another reason for homosexuality in children. Many marriages end in separation and divorce. Number 6, selfish individualism grows. This fragments society into smaller and smaller group loyalties. Have you imagined lately how large the group is that you're loyal to? You may have found yourself being fragmented into a smaller and smaller and a smaller group as time goes by. The nation becomes involved in internal conflict, resulting from this change in men and women. And we're dealing with what happened in the Roman Empire. But I think you can see a lot of similarities into what is happening in America. The older population, with less ability to defend themselves and the less will to do so. The population of America is becoming older and older. It is going to put pressure on the Social Security system. If it isn't already, it's coming very quickly. Number 7, and the last one. The unbelief in God becomes more complete. Parental authority diminishes. Ethical and moral principles disappear completely. That's the final stage. Have you noticed the lack of parental control in our children? If you want to get an update, you might want to talk to a teacher of your children. I think they'd be glad to share with you what they think. Authority diminishes, ethical and moral principles disappear. Are there any ethics anymore in our country? Or is it anything goes? You've heard the old saying, if it feels good, do it. That's the anything goes prophecy. And I think that's kind of where we're at. We are a recreation-oriented society in America. Our moral and spiritual principles are eroding surely. You can see it in every aspect of life. You can see the crime rates going up, the murder going up, the rapes going up, the assaults going up. There are just no morals anymore as a country. Yes, we've got good people. We've got good Christian people that abide by the law and abide by the law of God, which is more important. And they read the Bible and they understand it, and they seek guidance from pastors and preachers. But we're looking at society in large or at large. What is the fiber of the current situation? What is the morals of the current situation? The Apostle Paul dealt with it in his letter to the Roman church. And he wrote this letter in AD 57, so he wrote it about 300 years before the Empire of Rome completely disintegrated. The church in Rome was made up mostly of Gentiles. And when we start in verse 18 of chapter 1 of Romans, and if you grab a Bible real quick and read along with me, the first thing he mentions starting in verse 18 is the sin of the Gentiles. Like I said, the church in Rome was made up mostly of Gentiles with a very, very small percentage of Jewish converts. So he's speaking to the Gentiles in the Roman church. And at that time, Rome was the most powerful nation on earth. It was about 300-something years before it collapsed. So he is writing this information that we find here in chapter 1 a long, long time before it actually crumbled. But it crumbled, and it was once the most powerful nation on the earth. Let's look at what he says to the church. And we're looking at chapter 1, verse 18. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, that no men are without excuse. I'm just reading what Paul wrote. No men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were dark. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal men and birds and animals and reptiles. We have our images: money, success, pride, you name it. Therefore, here we go. Listen real close. Therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts. God gave them over to the sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lust. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed with indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. You ever heard of AIDS? The due penalty of their perversion. Does it go together? Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. I didn't write it. I just read it. It's God speaking through Paul to a church. And he's also speaking through Paul to the nation of Rome 300 years before they finally collapsed. I don't think they heeded his advice. I don't think they listened. You know, there'll be a time that God will judge this country. When that time will be, I don't know. You don't know. Steve doesn't know, the pastor. But God's judgment will come to America if we do not change our morals. This country will go the way of the Empire of Rome if we do not change our morals. Our children will continue to grow more belligerent if we do not change our morals. If men will not start leading their families in the worship of God, if we will not worship God instead of other things, money, material things, wealth, recreation, cars, whatever, anything we put before God is a moral issue. That I say that you should not make a living for your family, no, I did not say that. That I say that if your job became the most important thing in your life, I said that, and also did the Apostle Paul in his letter to Rome. Ladies, where do you stand? What is your lifestyle? I know by and large how older people are. So, I'm 81 years old. I know how old people think. We still live by some morals. Some things are not good. Some things are evil. Some things are sin. You just don't do those things. But the young ladies, listen. What is your lifestyle? What are your important things? What do you put number one? Is God number one? Is your husband, the father of your children, and your children right behind God in that thing? Is that the next most important thing after your relationship with God, or is it something else? I can't answer the question for you. You're going to have to self-examine, like all of us do from time to time. You're going to have to decide what's right and what's wrong. But old saying goes, a nation or a people or a person, anyone, that does not study history are doomed to make the same mistakes. I study history. I'm a history buff. I love it. I find lessons in it. I find things that I need to change in it. I find things I do not need to do in it. I try not to make the same mistakes that they've made in history. The nation of America, if we are to survive much longer, folks, we are going to have to listen to history. We're going to see what happened. We're going to see what they didn't do. They didn't change. They didn't worship God. They didn't put him number one, and they fell. May God have his blessings on the nation of America. Good morning. I hope you have a very, very good day. Thank you.